So Kirk, when you were starting to franchise in the UK, had there been anybody who had franchised youth sports back then?
Yeah, they did. They had, and I think so. There was Little Kickers, which was run by Christine Stankus, who had sold actually. There was Rugby Tots. There was Water Babies. It was a pretty yeah. There were quite a
So,
few franchises.
okay, so some had established themselves.
Yeah.
I think this is fascinating because as we start talking about franchising, you're of course doing the exact reverse of what most of my guests do. Of course, they're in the US first and they look to expand internationally. And of course, UK being home to you, I find it incredible. You guys have grown to like 40 some odd locations in the UK and Ireland, correct?
Yes. Yes. Exactly. Yes.
And so after that, so once you've established everything in the UK and Ireland, tell me about what was your mindset about coming into the US?
Yeah, I must say that franchising in the, I mean, because yeah, this is a, I must say that franchising in the UK was really led by what was going on in the US as well. I think that you were a pioneer in what you had achieved in I9 Sports. It's actually quite amazing that I'm on this podcast because I've seen what you've done over the years and been such a fan of what you've done, and I think that's really inspired me and others in the UK to do the same in terms of franchising. Before I go on to the US, well, even in the UK, it was about differentiating what we did versus other franchises. There were multiple soccer franchises, there were multiple swimming and rugby franchises in the UK. Why were we different? And that's what we had to really, that was quite a simple question to answer because we were different because we were based on the premise of track and field, right? Run, jump, and throw. The classes don't take place on the track and field, but the actual class was built around running and jumping and throwing rather than these
Than
specific.
kicking or throwing a ball.
Yeah, right. And nobody was doing that. And so what we did, and when we started franchising back in 2017, we had no aspiration to go to the States at all. But I had traveled in the States a lot with my previous job. And I knew that I really wanted to bring something to the States. It would have been, just because you love your sport, and I love US sport. I love going over to the US and experiencing the baseball. And we went to see the Rangers, and my sons are big Charlotte Hornets fans, and so we also looked at the market and looked at was there anybody doing what we're doing in the US, and the
Mhm.
answer was no.
No.
So it was the natural progression for us is to go to the US, and yeah, that was what we did. But I would say that it's very, very different. It's very different in terms of franchising in the US to franchising in the UK. So there were a lot of people in the UK said, "Well, that's a really big step," and are you sure? Like, because that's it's a huge market in the US, but there are over 4,000 franchise brands over there.
Hmm.
You going, are you sure? And we were so confident about how different we were to what was going on already that the answer was always yes.
Yeah, Kirk, what would be before we start talking U.S. based locations for you and the team? What would be a piece of advice you'd give to maybe another founder who's watching this that wants to bring their brand to the UK?
Well, I would say that bringing the brand to the UK. So in the UK, franchising is not regulated. There's not a huge amount of regulation in the UK, and that means that there's no FDD that is needed. Yes, there's a franchise agreement and so on, but otherwise there's not a huge amount of regulation. So bringing a brand to the UK is fairly straightforward from that. That's the first thing I would say. And I would also say that there's not as many franchise brands in the UK either as in comparison to the US. So if you've got a really good concept and you think that you're different and solving problems for the certain customers, then it's a really good market to go to.
Well, you established yourself really well, right, in the UK and Ireland with 40 locations before you came over to the US. So what did you think of this craziness and all of the regulation when you were going to expand to the US? It had to be, for me, it would have been intimidating for sure.
Yeah, yes. In answer to the question, it is, and it's mind blowing. But I actually love it. I actually think it's fantastic. And I think the UK needs to learn a lot from the US in terms of its regulation. So, yes, the FDD is such an important part of franchising. And we even have an FDD in the UK now, where no other, I couldn't even name a single brand that does that, but we do it. And I think it's so far ahead from that perspective that we love the process, going through the process. We have incredible lawyers and in Nicola Law. They've been incredible for us. And I mean, I would say that, how do I put this diplomatically? I was surprised. We don't have brokers. We don't have franchise brokers in the UK. Everything is sold organically in-house. There's no such thing as a franchise broker. So I was surprised with how big franchise brokers are in terms of selling franchises. And I think there's, in my opinion, coming from the UK, I think there's pros and cons of that.
Sure. I'd love for you to expand on that. What are some of your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So our experience was we'll approach some brokers. Okay, and I won't talk about which ones. There are some really ethical brokers that we actually are doing business with now, and they are fantastic. There are others that, without even wanting to see our business model, without even wanting to see our figures, without even wanting to see our FDD, just wanted to know what the initial fee was. And then they said to us, well, we'll sell for you, but we want to double the initial fee.
That sounds like, that sounds like a few that I've heard of.
Yeah. So, and I was absolutely blown over by that. I couldn't believe that happened because, and my response to that was, so you want to double our initial fee because it works for you, but does that actually work for us? And does that work for the franchisee? And I got into some pretty heated discussions with brokers about that because I just wasn't happy about how that was being approached. If they'd have looked at our business model and gone, right, okay, look, you're actually really undercharging your franchise, and because the quality of the franchise, what you've achieved in the US, in the UK, what the franchisees are doing there, looked at the FDD and gone, actually, I think we can afford to put up the initial fee, and we're going to take this much for doing the selling, and because they do a lot of selling, and we understand they're going to take a bit, then that would have been understandable. But I was blown away by how many people wanted to do that without seeing those details.
Well, yeah, because the first thing that bothers me the most is you haven't even asked me anything about my business. Like, oh yeah, I know kids sports. Let's go.
Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly
not cool at all. Well, that's a great advice, by the way, of your experience that others can learn from, of other emerging founders, because they're in a position where they want to award franchises, and you get desperate when you don't know how to, and you have people that solicit you and say, hey, I can do this. You want to sell 40 next year? We got this.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, we've been given that as well. You
Yeah.
say, oh, we'll put up the initial fee to this, but you've got to increase your team because we're going to be, we're going to be sending, 200 leads to you a week or whatever it's going to be. Like, it's just like, really? Yeah, are you going to do that? I don't know. I just maybe, but that's one side of brokers and FSOs. But I would say that was just one down. I mean, there's pros and cons. I said the pros are absolutely there to see. They really know the program. They know what they're selling. They know why it's different. They know why it will benefit the franchisee, and they look for the right candidates. And those brokers are really, really great. You just got to find them.
Kirk, what do you think is the main attraction that people have to your brand versus other opportunities? We talk about there's like 4,000 franchise opportunities out there in the US, and there's no shortage of anything to do with kids and sports. What do you think is really attracting people specifically to your brand, Mini Athletics, here in the US?
I think it's how different we are in relation to other sports, children's sports businesses. So our business is really, it's the program. It's the program that they'll be delivering. And our business is really focused on the athleticism, that run, jump and throw, the track and field foundations that are really important for kids in our age range. So our age range is walking. So right from when they're walking, right the way to when they're 8. So we have 4 different age groups: walking to 2, 2 to 3.5, 3.5 to 5, 5 to 8. And there's no other kids franchise doing what we're doing, mixing it with imagination, mixing it with different themes. Yes, every franchisor is going to say we offer great support. Of course, we offer great support. But what really matters is, what problems are you solving for your community?
Yeah.
So the problems you're solving for your community are that, well, you've got to a standard customer in Tampa, shall we say, there's probably a choice of soccer to take their kids to at preschool level. There's probably a choice of soccer. There might be some kind of multi-sport. But this program is designed to enhance their athleticism, is to enhance their inspiration of becoming, is to inspire them to love, to want to be active. It's super positive, and it's everything that sports should be.
Thank you for tuning into the Emerging Franchise Brands podcast. For additional insights, guest applications, and to stay connected, visit us at efbpodcast.com. The Emerging Franchise Brands podcast is for entertainment purposes only, and the views expressed do not necessarily represent those of Emerging Franchise Brands, its host Frank Fiume, or Emerging Franchise Group LLC. Any discussed franchise or investment opportunity requires thorough investigation, obtaining proper disclosure documents, and expert consultation before making any investment decisions. The podcast and its host do not offer professional advice or endorsements, and they hold no responsibility for actions, representations, accuracy, or consequential damages related to the podcast content.